If you've taken 2 or more of my classes, I bet you know one thing for sure. You know how much I love books. I really do love books. I've had a love affair with books for, I'd say most of, if not all of my life. I love to buy books. I love any subject matter, from how to inspiration, biographies. And yes, true confession, I love blank books. And I love making my own books. Yep, I do. And I even love filling them up. So today, in this very class, we're going to talk about how to choose the perfect blank book or art journal. The perfect one. That's the good news. The bad news? There is no perfect book. There is no perfect art journal. There's lots of different kinds. And so we're going to talk about all the different kinds, and I'm going to let you decide what's the perfect art journal or blank book for you. So let's get going. See what we can see here. We are going to start with the visual journal. This is by the company Strathmore. And Strathmore makes a whole line of these journals called the visual journals. This one happens to be 5.5 inches by 8 inches, right down here. And this particular one is 68 pages and it's 90-pound paper. Now, when you go and look at the Strathmore website, and this is how you spell it, Strathmore, when you look at their information that they have out there, you will see that they have this line of visual journals that have a number of different kinds, from mixed media to watercolor to so on and so forth. Anyway, so I thought I'm just going to show you the ones I have and talk about the ones I have, and then you get to decide what you like. Now, what's nice about this particular style of journal, in my opinion, is that, first of all, it's not perforated. Now, one of the considerations you have to have when choosing your journal is, what are you going to use it for? It seems kind of silly because it's an art journal, right? Or it's a writing journal. I mean, how hard can that be? It's a little trickier than you might think. Because you have to decide what you like and also what you're going to use it for. Now, one of my pet peeves is perforations in the paper. I personally do not like perforated pages, and you can look at this and you can see, I believe, that there's no perforated line down here. For me, that works great because I like to put stuff in my journals. I like to do art textures and I like to try things out on the papers, and I don't want the paper falling apart because it's got little bitty holes that get filled up with wet stuff and then they start disintegrating. I don't like that personally. Some people really want the perforations in the paper. I don't. So this is the visual journal in the smaller size, and this is the mixed media visual journal in the smaller size. So let's see if I can get some stuff out of your way here so you can see a little bit better. There we go. Now, what I use this particular journal for is this small size is great for carrying around, and I can write things in it. Like, I use this to track some of my supplies that I have, like some of the dyes from my die cutting machine. And sometimes I'll take some notes on here, some different techniques or things that I've seen also. And so this one I just kind of use, I also use it for putting leftover paint and ink and stuff like that in here. But this one is this is that smaller size, and no matter what I throw at this paper, even the 90-pound paper, it will take it pretty well, and I really do appreciate that. Now, here's another one. This is also by the Strathmore company, and this is also called mixed media, but it is different from the visual journal. These are two different kinds of journals. And this paper is also 90 pound, but it's a slightly, it's also not perforated. Pages are not perforated. This one has 40 sheets in it, and the visual journal one that I just showed you has 68 pages. And this size is 5.5 inches and wide and 8.5 inches tall. The other one is 5.5 inches wide and 8 inches tall. So the other one is a half an inch shorter in height. But this has, again, nice quality paper in it. It pretty much takes whatever you throw at it, as far as wet media and glue and so forth and so on. So it's a nice journal as well. I haven't done a whole lot in it, as you can tell. I've been kind of here's the thing. Here's the thing about us book people. If you fall in love with books, you're afraid you're not going to have enough. You're afraid you're not going to have enough. Isn't that silly? And so we have to have an extra 2 or 3 or 5. Like this one is an extra one. I have to have this so that when I need that new book to start in, I got it. It's just true confession time. What can I say? It's just true confession time. All right. So let's take a look at these. This is the Strathmore Mixed Media Visual Journal, but this is the bigger size. And this one is 9 inches by 12 inches. And this paper is 140 pound. So this is 140 pound paper. And the small one over here that I showed you just a moment ago, the smaller size that I showed you, this one is 90 pound paper. So 90 pound, 140 pound. So there's quite a difference in the thickness of the paper. But they're both still called visual journals, and they're both mixed media. So it has nice paper, but it's considerably heavier than the paper that I just showed you in the smaller one. Now, what I use this particular one for, this one is kind of a technique journal where I do a lot of sample things. So any of you that took the the class on glues, this is where there are a lot of samples that I've shown you about using glues and tape. And sometimes I even do them upside down because I forget which way is the right way around. And so some pages are right way up, some pages are wrong way up, and it doesn't really make any difference to me. And then in the back of this one, I had a bunch of leaves from I picked up when I was walking in the fall, a couple of years ago actually. And I wanted a place to just keep track of them. And so I just glued them in this visual journal. And this had a lot of glue. I use Mod Podge to put these in. And so they're glued in with Mod Podge. And it stood up to a lot of glue, because that's a lot of glue holding those puppies in there. I have to say I'm not all that cracked about what the Mod Podge did on these. But, the whole purpose was to get them in the book some way so that they wouldn't be falling apart on me and crumbling. It did a good job for that. So that is what that journal is. Now this is exactly the same journal, but this is actually used as an art journal. This is an art format. So I'm showing you this mostly to show you how much stuff I have used on this. This has got wet glue, and it's got paint, and it's got tape, and it's got all different kinds of stuff. There's texture paste on here. Let's see if we can, let's show it to you this way. See if we can get it this direction. So this has got texture paste. See, that is texture paste pressed through a stencil to get those numbers. And it has wallpaper tape and all kinds of stuff on here. The drywall tape is what I meant to say. And here's some other applications of paints and gelatos and oil pastels and water-soluble oil pastels. And the pages are not warping. You can see there's some thickness in them where as I've added layers of stuff. There's tissue paper and collage from napkin art and all different kinds of things. Lots of drawing, lots of writing. And the pages have stood up to everything that I could throw at it and have remained flat. This is the drywall tape. So, and this page is where I was doing a technique to mimic metal. So I was mimicking metal on this. So that's all done with tape and tissue paper and stuff. And it stood up to that just fine. And that must have, I don't know, 4 or 5 layers of paint on it. This is napkin, paper napkin that's put down with collage glue and so forth. I mean, it really is amazing what this paper will take. This is all little pieces of aspen leaves, just sort of a make-believe aspen leaf that is glued on here. This has got stencil in the background. It's got tape around the edges. This is just something that's waiting for whatever I'm going to do with it next, because I do that a lot. I just put my leftover paints and leftover inks and stuff. I'll slap them on the page, and then that way I've got something to start with. This has got leftover paints and inks and tapes and tape transfers and you name it. It's just nothing, no particular theme going yet. And then sometimes I'll add pockets. So this is a pocket right here. This is just a pocket that I've added. And then mostly just a bunch of inks, and a lot of this is gelato or stencils that I've sprayed with spray inks, and then there was ink left, and so I turn it over and smash it in my book. But this is one of my favorite journals so far. I like it. Several things I like about the visual journals. I like that there's no perforation. I like the weight of the paper of this bigger size, the 9x12 size. I like the weight of the paper. I like the fact that it doesn't warp. It does add thickness as I build up stuff, but it doesn't warp and so forth. So I like that. That's a good. This is a good journal. You can never have too many of those. So I'm just saying, get yourself some of those. If you like the art journal, this is a really good one. Okay, making ourselves a stack out of the way here. This one is the Canson Mixed Media Journal. And I've covered up the cover so you can't see what it is, but it is a blue cover, and it says Mixed Media on it, and it's by the company Canson, Canson. And I have added paint on top of the cover, and then this is a piece of canvas that I've done, that I've decorated and sprayed, painted and all kinds of stuff, and then glued down. I beaded on top of it and so forth. Same thing on the back. So the cover is a nice sturdy cover, and it took the paint. I think I probably did gesso and then paint on it and then glued on the decorated canvas. Now this paper is not as heavy as the visual journal paper is. And I want to show you in this journal one of my big beefs about this one, and that is, you can see this line right here. See that? That line right there is perforation. So if you get this wet, and it takes quite a bit to get it pretty wet, but if you get it pretty wet, that paper will perforate and it will come out. Or if you just want a piece of the mixed media paper to use on your own, some people like it just to use it as their, for the basis for other kinds of journaling and drawing things and mixed media art, maybe to make cards or whatever. They like having this paper perforated so they can tear it out. And it works great for that. But if you want the paper to stay in your journal, I don't I personally don't care for the perforations, but that's me. So I'll show you some of the pages in this one. Some of the pages that I've done in this, just some of the techniques so you can kind of get an idea of how it stands up to things. This is something that I added, so I've added with tape. This page has got a lot of stuff glued on it, a lot of paint applications. There was a lot of writing, but this was a tip-in, it's called, where if there's tape on here to add the flap, there's more tape on this side, so it's stood up to that. This has a lot of heavy gesso and so forth added on top of that. So lots of things that you can add into it. You know, you can add various and sundry layers. This is an added page, so it had pocket space. This again is kind of one of my technique things, so I can remember how to do things using this kind of paper just to see how it would work. So this has got a vellum window in it. This is vellum behind here. Vellum doors and so forth. This has a lot of spray inks. This is spray ink and so forth behind it. The paper really has held up well to it. It's not, like I said, it's not as heavy as the visual journal paper, but it's held up well. This has texture paste, modeling paste spread through a stencil. And I was trying to see if you could see it. It's not a very heavy application, but all of this in the background that you see, that's all done with texture paste or modeling paste scraped through a stencil. Now this has a lot of layers of paint on it, so does this one. And this paper is held up quite well to it, and although the perforations are there, I've put a lot of stuff over the perforations, a lot of paint. I put paint over it, or I've put some of the texture paste, modeling paste type things, or wood icing is another kind. I've put those over the holes, spread it over the holes to try and reinforce that. And as of now, as of this point in time, nothing has tried to come out, but I've also put tape over the holes in on some of the pages so that it wouldn't have any chance of the perforations turning loose. So you can see some of the reinforcement there. This is using frog tape that I put over the holes. So that is something I will typically do. If it's a perforated page, I'll put tape over it, or I'll put something over those holes just to kind of reinforce it. And then when I come back over it with whatever I'm kind of wet media and stuff I'm doing, I'm pretty well assured that it's not going to try and come out. So you can see that here there's not been anything. Anyway, so that is, and then again I just sort of put paint and various things. I'll use my blank pages as a place to park extra paint and stuff. So that is the Canson Mixed Media Journal, and I've been very pleased with it. The pages do warp a little bit. You can see a little bit of warping going on in here from the wet applications of paint and so forth. But I've been really pleased with the Canson Mixed Media Journal. So it's been a fine journal as well. All right, so now we're going to talk about the one that people absolutely are crazy in love with or don't like at all. It's you one side or the other on this one. There's just usually no second middle ground about this journal. This is called a Moleskine or a Moleskine or a Moly. It's kind of like whatever. There's about a billion different ways to say it. I call it a Moleskine. Some people call it a Moleskine. I don't know. You can call it whatever you want. This one is the Pocket Sketchbook, and this is the Moleskine Sketch, and I believe it's the pocket size. This is about, let's see, 5 by 8, I believe. Yeah, it's 5 by 8 is the size of this one, 5 inches by 8 inches, and the moleskines come with bands around them. And this one, and they're different colors, and the different colors tell you what their purpose is. And the sketch ones have a lavender or light purple banding that goes around them. So this is what it looks like. It's a kind of a yellow creamy, it's not a white, it's kind of a creamy yellow color page in it. And it's a pretty nice sturdy paper. I'd say it's about a 90-pound paper. I can't remember because I don't think I have the band with it anymore. But this is a good one to use, and I used this as a travel journal when I went to visit a friend of mine. And so I took a whole bunch of stuff that I had cut out, you know, text paper, dictionary paper, and so forth and so on, and just some ephemera, bits of this and that. And as I was traveling, I was journaling and writing things down and putting some quotes and stuff. And so it gave me something to do when I was waiting in the airports. And so this was just a page. Mostly this is pages about spending time with my friend and some of her animals and so forth. And this is a page about my friend and me. And this is just a page about best friends. She has mules and horses and so forth. And not only are she and I best friends, but some of her best friends are her animals. So I was just doing some remembrance of that. And this was just where I was doing stuff, you know, extra stuff with paints and sprays and so forth. And this page, which you can barely see, this is what I was seeing when I was looking out the airplane window when I was flying. So this is what the ground looked like, and I love the pattern. That's one of the things I really love about using my journals for, is to capture patterns and things that inspire me. So this has lots of just, you know, odds and ends of stuff. And then this is typical of my journals, the various journals. I will stick stuff in the back of them so that I have it, you know, when I go back to work in that journal, I have stuff that I want in this particular journal. So anyway, this is the Moleskine or Moleskine or Moly or whatever you want to call it. And a note that I have stuck with this journal so that I'll remember, pardon me, is if you, pardon me, if you spray the pages with a little bit of water so it's evenly damp, and then let it dry, and then go in with whatever your paints or inks and so forth, it tends to reduce some of the splotchiness. So that it was a note that I had with that. The pit pens and zig pens are good to use on it, and that the paper will support lots of layers of paper and paint. If you use Sharpies, however, or Copic markers, they will show through. And if you erase a lot on the paper, it can start the paper pilling or balling up. So when you have notes about various journals, you might do exactly that. Make notes and stick it in the journal. So, or you can even, you know, actually attach it inside the journal, which is a good idea too. So that is a Moly. And Molys come in lots of different configurations and different sizes. So, if you like Molys, there is a Moly that will suit your needs. Let me tell you, there's plenty of Molys out there. All right, this is another journal that's kind of new on the market. It's been out, maybe a year or two, I suppose. That's probably about maybe 2 years. And it has comes with an elastic band around it, as does the Moleskine. Moleskine has an elastic band that goes vertically. This one, the elastic band goes horizontally around it. And this is Diane Reevely's, let me give you the right name for it. This is the Diane Wakley Dylusions Creative Journal. Diane Reevely's Dylusions Creative Journal. That's a mouthful. I mean, this journal is set up differently than some of the other ones, in that it has a chipboard cover that you can decorate, you know, color, add collage, whatever you want to. But this is a heavy chipboard cover. It has an envelope here in the front where you can put ephemera or things that you're waiting to put in your journal or what have you. It has a pleat in it, so it will expand. But the journal is all attached to the back cover. So the front cover just comes over it, but the journal is attached to the back cover, and it has two different kinds of paper in it. It has manila cardstock and it has white cardstock. So let's see if I can show you that. This is one of the, let's see. I'm not sure whether the camera will pick this up or not, but when you look at it from the side, you can actually see a difference in the colors of the pages. So it has the two different kinds of cardstock pages in it, and it's pretty heavy paper. It's about, I'd say it's probably about 90 pounds. Again, I don't have the banding that came on it anymore, but it's a pretty nice weight of cardstock pages, and it is intended for the Dylusions ink sprays and techniques using water, inks, paints, and mediums. Let's see. Oh, and just so you know, my experience with this, that information came directly from a website. But my experience with it is if you get too much water and ink and stuff going on, too many wet things, and you start abrading rubbing on the pages too much, you will cause the paper to start kind of pilling up on you. But as long as you don't do a whole lot of rubbing and abrasion on the surface, too much friction on the surface, it holds up to a lot of layers of wet stuff. So let me give you a quick tour through some of these pages. This one has a lot more photographs on it than a lot of my pages do. Most of my pages that I'm doing on art journaling don't have so much of that. They'll have more writing. This was all prompt based by something that I was working on. This one has a lot of layers of inks on it, but what I did was I let them dry, and this one as well. What I did was I put a layer of wet stuff on it, and then I let it dry, or I dry it with a heat gun to make sure that I wasn't going to do a whole lot of rubbing and abrading of the pages. And so like this one has got a lot of wood icing, it's called, or it's similar to modeling paste spread through a stencil, and it took that just fine. It does do a little warping of the pages when things get really wet, but that really doesn't bother me. I'm just showing that to you because some people want to know about that. There is no perforation of the pages. The pages are stitched. They're not on a spiral binding. They're stitched in. You can see down here. Now you'll notice that there's tape in here, and the reason I did that, and I've done tape on several of the pages, but not all of them. Here you can see the stitching. Is because when you do the spray inks or the wet media on this, it'll go right through those holes where the stitching is, and it will go through onto other pages. So let's see if I can find one to show you. And this is a page again that has a lot of the wood icing or texture paste through stencils. And this is a pretty heavy application. This is actually a piece of chipboard cut out in the shape of my hand that's got ink and stuff, and so that's been applied. This is string that's applied to the surface of the page, and it held up to that. You can see the texture, the height of that, held up to that fine. Here's an example. You can see where some of the ink has come through from a different page. Here's another place you can see. So if that kind of thing bothers you, to have the ink or paint, wet stuff coming through from one page to another, then you're going to need to put some tape or something down there to either camouflage that or to stop it from coming through. And so that is that. Now this has lots of thickness from these flowers that are on here, especially this one has a lot of thickness from the button. So that's going to give me some thickness to the book, but I really like I like big chunky thick books as they accumulate and when I fill up the pages. So then you just put the elastic around it and it holds it shut. And if you outgrow the elastic, then you can just put some cords or something through the holes and you can make a new closure for it. So that's the Dina Wakley Dylusions Creative Journal, and I like that very much. You just have to be careful that you don't abrade the pages, you don't rub the pages too aggressively. Now here's another one that you might not think of using as an art journal, but this is a composition notebook. Now composition notebooks are usually available quite widely at the time that school supplies are available, and so where I live, that's a couple of times a year when school starts in the fall, and then often they'll be available again when the second semester starts, which here is around January. And these are usually very reasonably priced, and it's a composition notebook. It is a stitched notebook, so you can see the stitching in here, right in there. And this one is lined paper. Now the composition notebooks are available in several different page designs. Some of them are lined like this. Some of them are lined with the like grade school, the two big lines and the dotted line in the middle. So sometimes you can get that. So you'd have two wide lines and then a dotted line in the middle where you can have children, you can teach kids how to write their letters and so forth. Sometimes you get them in what looks like graph paper. Sometimes they're available with music staff paper, music paper, and so forth. But the ones that I typically get are the ones that are just like this. And what I like to do with these is I like to take 2 pages at a time and glue them together because the paper is relatively thin. So I'll just use a glue stick, and it doesn't really matter what kind of glue stick as long as it's a good juicy glue stick. Don't use one that's gotten dry on you. And the way that I do that is back here in the back. I'll show you because I've already stuck all the rest of them together. I usually put a piece of waxed paper or freezer paper on one side to protect it and keeps me from smearing glue where I don't want it. So we'll pretend that I've got some kind of wax paper because I forgot to pick it up, truthfully. And I put it around the edges. And if you use a glue stick, some of them you can get are blue or purple when they are wet, and that's helpful because then you can see exactly where you've applied the glue. And so I apply the glue around the edges of both pages that I'm going to stick together. And then if I go up and down on one page, I usually go across on the other page. Just that way I'm pretty sure that I'm going to catch all the surface of the paper. And then I take that paper, and you can see it's fairly thin, and I put it together, glue side to glue side, and then I use a squeegee of some kind. This could easily be an old credit card or something like that. I just happen to have this great big squeegee, which is for screen printing, and it's nice because it's big. And then just squeegee those pages, and I usually do that on both sides of the paper that I've glued together. And then you want to just turn the page and just keep going. And so I glue them in sets of 2 all the way through the book, which is what I have. And then I just stick my squeegee in the place where I've stopped. And that makes a nice sturdy page by just putting just 2 pages together. Then if you will gesso, put a coat of gesso, which is just a white primer. If you'll put a coat of gesso on top of that, then that makes the page even a little sturdier, and it will stand up to a remarkable amount of wet media, from paint to gelato to stenciling to spray inks. It stands up to a lot of stuff. And then, of course, you can decorate your cover with handmade paper or patterned paper or whatever you want to use on your composition notebooks. But I use those a lot. And the nice part about it, too, when using composition notebook is you have the lined paper. So if you want to use this journal as something where you write on some pages and you art journal on some pages, you've got the lines there, and it's really handy to be able to do that. So that is a pretty cool thing to use. And these are, like I said, very reasonably priced. A lot of times I find them when the school supplies are available, widely available. I can find them for sometimes $2 for $1 or $4 for $1. It just depends. You know, it's a great deal. Okay, so let's keep on going with some other options for art journaling. And this is kind of a cool journal. This was a craze that hit the market, oh gosh, it's probably been 3 years or so. Been out here for about 3 years now. And this is the Smashbook craze. I have so many journals here, I'm having to reorganize myself just a little bit. I told you you can't have just one. Yeah, I know. You can't have just two. You have to have lots of journals, so you have lots of choices. And all right, anyway, this is from the Smashbook company. This is called a Smashbook, and these are available in different configurations and sizes. There is a smaller, little tiny size that they've come out with now. That's about 4 by, let's see, it's probably about 5 by 6 or something like that. It's really small. This one is about 7. It's not quite 8. It's about, they're going to call it 8 by 10, I believe. And this particular one is the doodle format. So if you need something to help you get started with your art journaling, this can kind of help you because there are some prompts. The pages have some decoration on it. Sometimes there's some words that give you things to get started with. Some of the pages are lined, some of them have graph paper, there's some drawings on some of them that are already there, and just some cues for some different things. Now, the paper in this, some of it is cardstock weight, which has got some strength to it, but most of it is more the weight of a double-sided scrapbook paper, and it has some limitations. Meaning that you're not going to be able to come in here with a bunch of paint and put on this and not have it warp and carry on. This paper is not heavy enough to take wet applications of things. But it's great for things like you can use it for taping, using tape or glue stick to glue things in. They come with their own, if I can get it off to get it out here, to show you, they come with their own pen and glue stick. So in one end there is a glue stick right here, and the other end there is a pen. So it's like a black felt tip. And they come, most of the Smashbooks come with that pen, which this isn't going to last forever, but it's going to last for a while. And so that way you can glue stick things right in your book. So if you carry your book with you, and you're out, I don't know, shopping or, having an adventure of some kind, you can just take your book with you and put stuff into it right then. The things that I think this book is really good for, some uses that I do with this, is I put photographs in it. I use it to record inspiration, like color combinations or patterns. When I'm out looking someplace, and that I might see patterns in flooring or patterns in wall coverings or carpet or tapestries or light fixtures. And so you can just take, because you've got a pen with it, or you can carry some pens or pencils with you and do that. Just make sketches, make notes in it. Color combinations that you see when you're out and around. Quotations, inspirational quotations. I think that is the perfect use for the Smashbook. And not so much using it for paint and that sort of thing, but it's great for carrying with you and using it for a specific purpose. So that's the Smashbook. Now here's some other ones that I'm going to show you that we all make mistakes when we first get into doing things that are new to us, or mistakes that's probably not a good word. We all have a learning curve. We all have learning experiences. This is one of mine. And this one is a sketchbook. That's the cover. So let me open it here so you can see. So this is a sketchbook. And this, let me get a page here so you can see. All right. Right here is a prime example of why this is not a great book to use. And this is right here has perforated pages. And not only are the pages perforated, but this is really, really lightweight paper. This is a sketchbook, and it's intended to use as a sketchbook, which means the paper is very light, and it's intended to be used with a pencil or charcoal or pastel, or you could use pan pastels with it. There's a number of different kinds of things that you could use with this kind of paper, but what I'm trying to do with it, which is wet stuff, is not a great idea. But I didn't know that. And so when you don't know any better, sometimes you make an error in your choice, and then it becomes a matter of, okay, am I going to work with this or am I going to give up? Well, guess what? I decided I was going to work with it. So I decided to use this book as my book of words I love. And so that's what we have here. It's the book of words I love. And there's a lot of wet stuff on here. There's a lot of layers of paint and collage and so forth. And you can see right over here that it's going to come apart. And you know what? That's just what's going to happen. I've reinforced over all the perforations with tape, and that works fine. That will reinforce that part of it. But the part here around the rings, this is not going to last, and this is going to come apart. So eventually I'm going to have to do something else with this to protect the pages and so forth. But for right now, you know, as long as I'm careful with it and I'm the only one looking at it, it is coming apart. But you know what? It is until it completely falls out, I'm not going to do anything about it. And then I'll figure out what to do later. But it still is, the paper is not disintegrating. It's just disintegrating in here where and it's not even disintegrating. It's just that it's not, I'm pushing it past what this paper was intended to do. So this is not the fault of the book. I'm just using it for something it was not meant to be used for. This is meant to be used for literally pencil sketching. It is not intended to be used for gluing and paint and all that and collage and all that kind of stuff. But you know what? I decided I was going to do it, so I'm going to pay the price. And that's like, oh well. But I found that with this kind of paper, if, and this is a big if, but if I will put wet stuff on it, like if I'm going to put paint on it or I'm going to put gesso on it, if I will put that on and then make sure that that first layer is really dry, then I can come back over it with subsequent layers, and the first layer kind of gives it some strength, and then the subsequent layers add strength to it, and it works fine. None of that is going to solve the problem I have here with the rings, where it's coming apart with the rings. That will not solve that problem. That's just something I'm going to have to deal with later. But there is quite a bit of thickness that I've built up as I've established the various layers of paint and gesso and tape and what have you. It's thickened up the paper, and as I said, I wish I had started this because I put so much into this already. I wish I had started this in the visual journal, but you know, this was before I knew better. And so, you know, as Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better, right? But you can see just by looking at it that there's quite a few layers of different colors and different, you know, attachments of things where I've added tip-ins of various things. Sometimes I find something I want to use and I'll just stick it in here and go, oh yeah, I'll put that in there someday. You know, so I'll just add different things in here that are waiting to be added to this journal. But this particular journal is my book of positive words. So it has a specific purpose, and so it's waiting. It's it will always have to be treated carefully and kind of with kid gloves, simply because I'm pushing it past what it is comfortable doing. And so it is a sketchbook. And so you can indeed use books sometimes as art journals that aren't intended to be used as art journals, but you do have to be aware of the fact that they do have some limitations. So that is a sketchbook. This one was a hardback book that came from, I picked it up at one of the bookstores. And this particular paper is drawing paper. Now there's a little difference between the drawing paper and the sketch paper, and the drawing paper seems to be a little smoother. It seems to be a little, not necessarily heavier, but it doesn't seem to be quite as vulnerable as the sketchbook paper. But again, I'm doing stuff with this one that it's not intended to have done to it. I've used paints. I've used this is fine because this is just crayons and markers and stamping and so forth, and that was fine. This is using, on this piece, I used more of oil pastel on it, and it held up okay with that. This is done more with watercolors or acrylic paints. I've forgotten which. And it worked okay. You just have to be patient with the paper. This is watercolor. You have to be patient with the paper. This is, let's see, I think this was chalk, pastel chalk. But you just have to be careful and be patient with the paper. Let layers dry. Here's one that is done with stencils and acrylic paints. But this is the drawing paper, and as long as you're patient with the paper and you let layers dry and don't try to manipulate it too much when the paper is wet, then it will hold together. It's when the paper is wet, and that's when it's vulnerable, and so you can easily rip it, tear it, and so forth and so on. So anyway, this is all done with marker. The part that's nice about it, and you can see it even with the marker, it didn't even come through. The part that's nice about this is that it's bound. It's hard bound. And so it's been a fine, it's held up remarkably well. And this, on the cover, this had just a black cover on it. And this has an enormous amount of glue and collage and handmade paper and you name it applied to the surface of this. And then now the thing is, you got to let it dry really, really, really well. But it worked out fine. So that's drawing paper. Now, this is another kind of book that you might use for an art journal, and that is a recycled book. So this came from a secondhand store. I was intrigued by this book because it had such a pretty cover on it, and because it had gold pages, gold edged pages. And what you do with a book like this is you want to go through, when you're using a recycled book like this, and you want to tear out pages. So you can see that those pages have been torn out. And so I'm trying to think how, I think I tore out about every other page. And so what I did was I put a metal edged ruler on, laid it on the paper right here, put like a metal edged ruler, and then tore the paper out. And I saved all the pages to use for other things. And so then this became an art journal. I started this one in 2011. You can see up here, 2011. And I do a lot of words. I do a lot of writing. Especially at the beginning of the year, I do a lot of, what I want to have happen, or what I want to accomplish for that year, the kinds of things that I want to work on, kind of setting intentions or goals or whatever. And so I'll do that frequently. When you do use a book like this, where the paper, this is nice heavyweight paper, when you do this, you have to put gesso on the paper, especially on these glossy pages, or you have to sand them with, if the paper will stand up to a sanding with a fairly fine sandpaper. So this was, when I was starting this one, this was to be a monthly kind of, a spread for the month. So this was March and so forth, and this stood up to additional, pockets and things like that. Now what you can see here that it didn't like, can you see all this speckling? That's where the paint stuck to the facing page. And so that probably happened because I probably didn't let it get good and dry. That would be probably what happened on that. So I can either go back and repair that, or I can just learn from it and keep on going. So here's some more pages just to show you this paper stood up to a lot of abuse. This has the wood icing or modeling paste through the stencils on it. A lot of collage on here. Same thing on this page. Lots of collage layers. You can see more of where it's stuck. Some of the pages stuck together. And again, I can go back and I can fix that, or I can leave it. It just depends on how much it bothers you, or how much it bothers me, right? So just, I do a lot of experimentation when I'm doing pages in my art journals, just playing around with them. This was from Mother's Day, and some cards, and these are photographs from some flowers that I received and so forth. And then over here, this is where I have started another page where I just have some background. This was a page in the book that I just put tissue paper over. And that's as far as I've gotten with this particular art journal. You can also do the same kind of thing with magazines. So you can use a nice big magazine to use as an art journal. You can do the very same thing, but I would remove some of the pages to allow for some expansion, because the pages will, as you can see, as I've added layers of stuff to these pages, how much room it's taken up. So you need to decrease the size of a recycled journal. You need to decrease the size of it by removing pages, in order for, otherwise you're going to end up, if you don't do that and you fill up this book, you're going to end up with a journal that is like, that open, which if you like, that's fine. Totally fine. All right, so now let's talk about the other kind of art journal that you might like to have, is one you make yourself. And so you can, I'm going to show you a few different ones that I've created, because, Like I said, if you've been hanging out with me, taking some of my classes, you already know how much I love all different kinds of books, and I like making my own too. So first of all, let's talk about using watercolor paper. And that is one of the best sources of material for making journals is just watercolor paper, watercolor pads. So this happens to be the Artist Loft brand. It's a watercolor pad. This is 140 pound. So this is the same weight as the big visual journal, mixed media journal that I showed you earlier. And this one has 24 sheets in it. Now, what I liked about this is actually cold pressed paper. And cold pressed paper, there are two kinds of watercolor paper, cold press and hot press. And the cold pressed paper has a more texture to it than the hot press. Hot press is much smoother, usually. But cold pressed paper there are different kinds of cold pressed paper. So you need to actually open up the pad of paper and feel it and see what it feels like. So this is one. Let me show you. I'm going to show you a couple of examples of cold pressed paper. So here, this is the one that's in the pad of paper that I showed you. And let's see. Here is another one. And I'm going to see if I can show you. Looking for a colored pencil here. I'm going to get a colored pencil out of my pencil pack here. So here is, just to show you, you see all that texture right there? That's from the paper. That's one side of this particular watercolor paper. Now if I go to the back side of it, this is the opposite side of the same sheet, and this is 140 pound paper. There is still some texture there, but it doesn't have as much texture on the back side of that paper as it does on the front side. So this is one side, well, I call it front side. That's one side of the paper. That's the other side of the paper. So there is texture on both of those. Now on this one, which is on the pad of watercolor paper that I'm showing you, and I'm using the same amount of pressure on each of these. There is on the pad, here is in the journal. I think you can see that this has a smoother application of the pencil. At least I hope you can see that, but that's what there is. This is a smoother application of pencil because the paper is not as textured as it is on the back side of this one. But on the front side of the other one, where it was so textured, there is a lot of difference between this paper and this paper. All right, now why do I tell you that? Why do I make a big deal out of that? I make a big deal out of that just because you need to take the paper pad and open it up and feel the texture of it. Feel it. And if you like it, which this, I was very surprised. This pad of this particular watercolor pad, which is the Artist Loft brand, this was like $6, I think, for this entire pad of watercolor paper, which is great. And I think it's a nice smooth surface, and it doesn't have a big difference on the back side and the front side. It's very comparable, very same smoothness on the back and the front. I was really surprised by that. You can take a whole block of this, or as much as you want, and you can turn this into your own journal. It has a nice heavy cardboard on the back, so you can use that for the cover of your journal if you wish. But that makes a great, that you can make yourself just a super wonderful art journal by using a watercolor pad. But just feel the paper to see if it's what you want, if it's what you like. Okay, now here are a couple of other watercolor journals. This is one that I created using watercolor paper, and this has a few couple of washes in it. Now this is even another kind of watercolor paper, and you can see the texture in this paper on one side has a very linear pattern in it on one side, but on the other side it's very, very smooth. So this one gives you a good example of the two opposite sides of this particular watercolor pad. Very smooth on one, very linear design on the other. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to know that that's what you're going to get. So here you can really see it again, that very linear design. This particular one I bound with a Coptic stitch binding. You can see this is indicative of that. This will lay flat no matter what, no matter where I open the journal. It will lay flat, which is nice. And then when I was finished with it, then I created this cover out of duck cloth or canvas that I painted and scratched words into and all that kind of stuff. And then I stitched it with some strips of ultra suede. That's what's around the edge, so you can see some stitching down there. And then I just glued it to the cover of my book. It's not glued into the spine area. That's all left loose. But it's just glued around the book to make that journal. And then this is a piece of grunge board, Tim Holtz grunge board that I painted and created a closure for the book. So that's where that one came from. This was also watercolor paper, and this watercolor paper is the same one that I just showed you, and then it has this very vertical design. Let's see if you can see it on here. You can see that vertical texture. You can see it right here. There's that vertical texture on one side, very smooth on the other. So depending on what, this happens to be ink on here, so depending on what surface, whether it's the smooth side or the textured side, you can get different effects from whatever you're doing. This one, I created the binding using duct tape. So it's simply duct tape, and then it has the watercolor signatures are stitched into through the duct tape to hold that book together. So that's another one made with watercolor paper. And that is cold pressed. Those that are heavily textured are cold pressed watercolor papers. Now this one, which is maybe, so what we have here, all of these are watercolor. Those are all made with watercolor paper, all of those. This one is also watercolor paper, but this is made with hot press watercolor paper. And give the camera something to look at here. This is hot press watercolor paper, and so this is very smooth, and it's smooth on both sides. And so this journal was made with one sheet of hot press watercolor paper. It was 140-pound hot press watercolor paper, and it is 16 pages, and it has some flaps. So it has some flaps in the pages here, like so. You can probably see. Here's one where I've started some collage on it. And the pages were sewn together, so it has it's sewn together with a pamphlet stitch to hold the pages together. But so the point is, you can make yourself a journal that's nice and big, that's got lots of pages in it, or you can make yourself a journal that doesn't have a lot of pages but has some interest because it has page flaps. So you can do a lot of things. But this is a smooth paper. It will take a lot of collage and wet media and so forth because it is watercolor paper. It's hot pressed, so it's very smooth. So that is pretty cool that you can do those kinds of things yourself. You can make your own journals. So let's review some things that you want to think about when you're doing your journals, when you're selecting an art journal. One, what are you going to use it for? Seems simple. It's an art journal. You know what? I forgot one to show you. I want to show you this one. Speaking of purposes, this is another journal. This one happens to be my gratitude journal because I like that concept. And this was a gift that was given to me, and it's a handmade, I believe she either made the book or she covered the book. She may have covered it because it has lined paper in it, and it's all very evenly lined. So I think she might have covered the book with a handmade paper or something. And so I've been embellishing the cover with whatever kinds of things. When I doodled or when I had leftover bits of this and that, I've been embellishing that. But I use this exclusively for writing in, so I just write things in it. And I pretty much write in it every night, that which I am grateful for. And so I have a bookmark, handmade bookmark, and so I just keep moving through my book. So I'm about halfway through this particular book. So that's another thing you can do with your handmade journals, or you could cover your journals or whatever, use them for writing in as well. So purpose. What's the purpose of your journal? What do you want it for? Do you want it to art journal in? Do you want it to do you want to use it to smash things in, like the Smashbook, where you're just taping things in or writing things in? Or do you want one that's going to stand up to paint and collage and glue and stuff like that? So what's the purpose of your journal? So that will help you decide what kind of paper you want or what kind of journal you want. And a big consideration is, for me, is whether it has perforated pages. I don't care for that so much, and so I'm a little pickier now when I go and look for a journal. If I'm in the market to buy a new journal, I'm a little pickier about the fact that I don't want it to have perforated pages. Just be aware that some journals have them, some journals don't. So just be aware of it, and that way you can make an educated choice. And what qualities do you like to have in your journal? Do you like thick paper? Do you like thin paper? Do you like it spiral bound? Do you like it sewn? Do you want to have, here's another style of journal that you can create, that you can make. This is out of junk mail. All of these are made out of junk mail. So this has, these are security envelopes. So this is junk mail and postcards. This makes a great journal. If you gesso the pages, this is one done the same, made out of the same kind of stuff. It just has stitching because I was making a different shape, and so I stitched papers together to make the size pages I want. But you can see they have a white look. That's because they're all gessoed, which helps thicken up the paper. So you can recycle your journal, recycle your junk mail into journals. This is the same kind of thing. So you can do that as well. Is that your intended purpose, to have to use up stuff? Because you can do that. You can take papers and leftover stuff and postcards and all that stuff that comes in the mail. You can make journals out of it. It just depends on what your purpose is, what you want to do with it. And here's the secret. This is a secret just between you and me. You don't have to just have one. Yeah. Look at this. Do you see this? Look at this. See this? See all this? And there's. See all those? All of this. These are all my journals. These are my art journals. And I hate to tell you that that's not all, but it's not all. Because I love the journals and I use them for different things. They have different specific purposes. And here's the other secret. sometimes I have one just because I like it. I made this little book. I made it just because I like it. I like the feel of it. I like the way it looks. I just happen to like that particular journal. And I don't feel compelled to write in it. Maybe I'll use it as a gift sometime, but I don't feel compelled to use it for something. Yeah. It's a sickness. I think it might be a sickness. But anyway, I give you permission. I hereby give you permission to go forth and find journals that you like and fill them up and enjoy them or not. The choice is yours. I hope you've had fun with me today exploring some of the options for art journals. If you've enjoyed this class, I hope you tell a friend. There's class notes that you can download. And I hope you'll join me again soon on another class. I'm Barb Owen of Barb Owen Designs and How to Get Creative. And I'll see you again real soon. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.